Hello students, welcome to the classroom once again. Tim here from Lessons on the Web, and today I'm going to tell you about the 5 mistakes that you can't afford to make when learning how to play the piano. So jumping right into the 5 mistakes you don't want to make when learning how to play the piano, number 1 by far that I observe teaching, people make this mistake all the time and you don't want to make it, is playing too fast. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell my students to slow their playing down. Now, this is a problem for a multitude of reasons, and a lot of times what will happen is a student will begin learning a song and they'll start out slow maybe the first few playthroughs, but then they say, okay, I've learned the song, well enough, I'm going to start to go fast. Big mistake. So some of the problems that may arise if you play too fast on a regular basis is that you're not going to be as aware of mistakes, right? They're just going to blow by you, basically. And you really need to do the slow practice so your brain can process everything well enough to avoid these mistakes. So no matter how far along you are in learning a song, you always want to go back to slow practice every now and again to correct mistakes. You'd be surprised what kind of mistakes you can find going back and practicing slow. I've even found myself missing beats in a measure. It might be a 4/4 time signature, but I only have like 3 beats in that measure, so that's a big problem. That's something I could only discover if either I played it with a metronome or if I played it really slow. Difficult measures especially should be practiced slow, and you want to practice those measures over and over again. We'll talk about this here in a second, and then you want to put them into the context of the entire song, and you want to even play that slow. You don't really want to, when you're playing, you don't want to have parts where you can play really fast and then parts where you have to slow down. That tells you that there's a certain part of the music that you don't know quite as well, and slow practice is one of the keys to getting through it. So the tempo or speed in which you play should be increased gradually. It's not something where you play it through once and then you play it fast. You don't want to do that. You want to play it very slow and then gradually over weeks or even months increase the tempo. Now for tip number 2, or mistake number 2, that all my students make all the time, and a lot of people do, and that is starting from the beginning of the song all the time. You're doing yourself a great disservice if you are starting from the beginning every single time. Now when you're first learning a song, it makes perfect sense to start from the beginning, right? Where else would you start learning a song? But after a few weeks, what'll happen is, because you first started to learn, like say you learn, it's a 3-page song, you learn the first page the first week, the second page the second week. Well, keep in mind, if you're starting from the beginning all the time, you, at the end of your practice, when you've learned all of the weeks, your first week or your first page will have been practiced 3 times as much. And you also start with the first page, and your attention span when you first sit down is the highest when you first sit down. So you really want to, after a while, instead of starting from page 1, start from the middle of the song somewhere, maybe page 2 or 3, depending on how long it goes. And then once you do that for a few weeks, you even want to start from the end, and even not play the music backwards, but say play the last line and then play the last line and then the line above that, and then work your way line by line up to the beginning. If you practice this way, it'll sound kind of silly because it won't sound like the exact song, but if you do this, you will experience much better results. I can promise you that. So remember, the tip is to get around this problem is to not start at the beginning all the time. Okay, a big number 3. Here it comes. The number 3 biggest mistake that you don't want to make is ignoring mistakes. Can't tell you how important this is. This is probably the number 1, well, I've said that about pretty much all of these, but this is one of the biggest things that can get in your way of real progress, because what'll happen is, if say you learn a song and there's a really hard couple of measures in the middle, and you've just been practicing this song for months and months and months, and then you notice, well, those measures aren't getting any better. So the song really isn't complete, and people will notice that when you play, that it starts out really good, and then there's a part where it gets kind of muddy and that you really struggle through. So you want to not ignore your mistakes. So obviously in the beginning when you first learn, you're going to learn a lot of mistakes. But after you learn for a few weeks, you want to start noting your mistakes. Start starring certain measures that you find the most difficult, or even chart out in your mind or on paper, okay, what are the hardest lines of the piece? And then star them. And then when you start practicing, start from those places. Start from the mistake areas and then play the song all the way through. I know it's much more enjoyable just to play the song through, maybe mindlessly, just from the beginning to end. And then you're not really paying attention to what else is going on there. The really things that really need the attention. It doesn't make sense to get better at something by practicing something you're already good at with it, right? Like if you were skateboarding, you wouldn't you would practice those tricks, the tricks that you're already good at, but you mostly focus on the things that you're not as good at, and that's how you get better overall at pretty much anything. So remember, the main tip for this section is to identify the problem areas and then start with those. When you practice, you'll have much more success. A big number 4, like I said, I say that about all of them, right? So number 4, also very important. The fourth mistake you do not want to make is not making the time to practice. Sounds pretty simple, right? I've already made videos talking about this, but you really have to make sure that you are spending the time consistently to practice. You want to set up a time, on the optimal scale. If things were perfect in the world, you always want to set a time every single day to practice. But like I've talked about in other videos, you probably have other things going on, and school and all kinds of things, work. But you want to fit in as many days as you possibly can, and you want to stick to those days. So maybe you decide ahead of time, all right, I have 5 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to practice, right? And I'm going to stick to it no matter what. I can take off, Tuesday and Thursday because I'm busy, I've, something going on, whatever. That's fine. But you want to stick to that every single week. And you want to try not to miss them. Like, honestly, there's probably a 1% time. 1% of the time, you will have a legitimate excuse where you have to break your schedule to not practice. But remember that that's 1% of the time. A lot of times what I do, is I make up excuses on, and I've gotten better at this, by the way, on not practicing. You go, oh, well, I also have this thing, or the show is on today, or I really haven't seen this friend in a while. Well, maybe that's one of the times you want to do it. It depends on how long it's been since you've seen them. You can be the judge of what your 1% of the time will be, but you want to, 99% of the time, stick to a regular schedule of practicing. You will see a lot better results from this. As close to 7 days a week as possible, but 3 to 5 to make some progress I think would be good. I think 5 is pretty realistic. So shoot for making a practice schedule and sticking to it regularly. Okay, time for the final one. There are probably more that exist out there. In fact, if you can think of more of these after the video is done, leave them in the comments. What is a common mistake do you think other people should avoid when learning piano and music? So if you're a teacher yourself, or if you're a student and you fell into a pitfall somewhere and you want other people to avoid that, because this channel is all really about learning together, leave it in the comments. What are some other mistakes do you think people make far too often on the piano? But now it's time for number 5, which is ignoring scales and exercises. I think a lot of people have the misconception that scales just are not fun to practice. Same with arpeggios or any of that other stuff, hand and exercises. These are all things you should be adding to your practice routine. Probably when you sit down and practice, you should do a scale, you should do a hand and exercise, and then maybe work through a Czerny exercise book, or really anything. But you should definitely be learning your scales. So that should definitely be part of your piano practice routine. And really that helps with two-handed piano playing and coordination. I know a lot of people ask me about that, how to get better at that. Scales is really good because you are coordinating your fingers. Your cross with scales, use a certain fingering, and you have to cross your fingers at certain times and at different times with each hand. So it really helps build coordination between the two hands. Again, remember to apply number one, even this. Don't play too fast. That will be a big detriment to your piano playing success. So with scales, you want to probably learn, maybe start out with one scale a week until you've learned, all 11 major scales, and then you want to go from there and learn your minor scales and things like that. So again, fit these into every time you practice to see optimal results. Do not neglect this number 5, which is scales and practice exercises. Okay, students, that concludes the lesson today, and 2 things I want to tell you about is 1, to subscribe for more lessons like this one. We have new lessons coming out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you really don't want to miss those. And also, you want to head over to Patreon, where you can support this channel and help us make even better lessons than the ones that are already here. So this has been Tim from Lessons on the Web. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you so much.